It's fascinating how the cross is just everywhere these days. You see it.
Yeah.
Like it's become like this global, like icon, you know,
Yeah.
jewelry, tattoos, art.
Ru-
Even in like the research we did for this deep dive, there's so much about, the power of it. And I think it's safe to say we're both a little curious about,
Yeah.
like, why does this symbol, this ancient symbol still like resonate with people so deeply today?
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely more than like just a piece of history or something. There's a reason it continues to hold, I think, such significance for people, especially I think in the spiritual realm.
Right. So for this deep dive, let's explore that, like that spiritual power, and maybe uncover some insights about how, really understanding the cross can kind of offer us like a fresh perspective or even change for people.
Yeah, I think a good place to start might be by acknowledging that the cross wasn't always like a symbol of hope and inspiration. In Roman times, it was actually like a tool of torture and execution.
Yeah, crucifixion. I remember learning about that in history class. Easily one of the most brutal punishments
Oh, yeah.
imaginable. Not exactly something you'd associate with like positive energy, right?
Exactly. It really represented like suffering and shame and ultimately like death.
Right.
But that's precisely what makes this transformation, I think, so profound
Okay.
and meaningful.
So how did this like symbol of cruelty become like an emblem of faith? That seems like a pretty radical shift.
Well, that's where the story of Jesus comes in. His crucifixion, I think, changed everything.
Okay.
Through his sacrifice on the cross, he took this symbol of defeat and turned it into something totally new.
I'm starting to see where this is going. So by like facing that horrific death on the cross, Jesus somehow flipped the script, making it about something more.
Yeah, the cross became a symbol of love and sacrifice, a testament to overcoming even like the darkest of times. And that's a message that's resonated with people, I think, across cultures and centuries.
But I imagine for those who didn't witness this firsthand, it was probably pretty hard to grasp, I mean, how do you make sense of something so brutal becoming a source of hope?
You're right. It's a complex concept.
Yeah.
And the Bible even addresses this directly in 1 Corinthians 1:18.
Okay.
It says, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God."
So some people saw it as foolish, while others saw it as like divine power. I guess that tension between perspectives kind of makes sense, considering what the cross represented originally.
Precisely. And that's exactly what makes the cross so intriguing. It challenges us to look beyond just like the surface,
Right.
to grapple with its deeper meaning.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of power a little bit. What exactly is this like spiritual power that people associate with the cross?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up like the idea of power because that's really at the heart of what the cross represents, I think.
Right.
But it's not power as we typically think of it.
Right.
Like physical strength or political control.
So it's more like a spiritual or internal power then.
Exactly. It's about transformation.
Okay.
Both on a personal level and in our relationships with others.
Okay.
One way to think about it, I think, is like the concept of freedom.
Right.
The cross, through Jesus' sacrifice, offers a way out of the things that bind us. Fear, guilt, negativity.
So it's almost like the cross provides like a reset, a chance to kind of break free from those things that are holding us back.
That's a great way to put it. And with that freedom comes a sense of healing.
Okay.
Not just in like a physical sense, but emotionally and spiritually as well.
Okay. I'm curious about this healing aspect a little bit.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? How does the cross connect to like the idea of healing?
Well, in the Christian tradition, there's a belief that humanity is separated from God because of sin, which is essentially any act that goes against God's will.
Okay.
And that separation causes like a kind of brokenness.
So sin is like this wedge that divides us from God, creating a sense of like distance or disharmony.
Precisely. And the cross, through Jesus taking on the weight of that sin, bridges that gap, allowing for reconciliation.
Okay.
It's like a path back to wholeness, both in our relationship with God and with ourselves.
That makes sense, but I've got to admit, like, the concept of sin always felt a bit abstract to me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Is there a way to kind of understand it in a more practical sense, like in everyday life?
Absolute. Think of it this way. Sin is anything that separates us from love, from goodness.
Okay.
It could be something we do that harms others, or even something we do to ourselves that prevents us from living fully.
Right.
It's about those choices that lead us away from our true potential,
Right.
from our connection to something greater.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
It's not just about breaking some arbitrary set of rules. It's about recognizing those things that are keeping us from
Yeah.
like being our best selves or from experiencing true fulfillment.
Exactly. And that's where the cross comes in.
Right.
It's not just about pointing out our flaws,
Yeah.
but about offering a way out of that cycle.
Right.
There's a powerful verse in Isaiah 53.5 that says, "By his wounds we are healed." It's a reminder that healing is possible,
Right.
that there's hope for restoration.
So through the cross, we can experience like a kind of spiritual and emotional healing that goes beyond
Yes.
simply like fixing what's broken on the surface. It's about addressing the root causes of our suffering.
Yeah.
Those internal wounds that we all carry.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're not alone in our struggles and that there's a source of strength and healing we can tap into.
Okay, I think I'm starting to grasp this idea of freedom and healing connected to the cross, but you mentioned transformation
Yeah.
in relationships as well.
Yeah. Right.
How does that work?
Well, think about it. If we're able to experience like healing and freedom within ourselves,
Right.
it naturally impacts how we interact with others.
Right.
We become more compassionate,
Right.
more understanding, more forgiving.
So that's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
The transformation we experience internally radiates outward, influencing our relationships and how we connect with the world.
Precisely. And that brings us to another important aspect of the cross.
Okay.
The idea of spiritual warfare.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that there are forces at play in the world that can influence our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions.
You mean like negative energy or temptation? It always seemed a bit,
Yeah.
well, dramatic to me.
Yeah.
Like something out of a fantasy novel.
I understand your skepticism.
Yeah.
It can be a challenging concept to wrap our heads around.
Right.
But think of it this way. We all experience internal battles, right?
Right.
Doubts, fears, insecurities that kind of hold us back. Those are real struggles, and sometimes they feel bigger than ourselves.
Okay. I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
Those inner battles can be pretty intense.
Right.
But how does the cross fit into all of this?
Yeah.
Does it give us some kind of like supernatural advantage?
It's not so much about superpowers as it is about having like a source of strength to draw on.
Okay.
The Bible speaks of Jesus triumphing over evil forces through his death and resurrection,
Right.
which symbolizes a victory that we as believers can also claim.
So the cross represents like a turning point in the battle between
Yeah.
good and evil.
Yes.
And by aligning ourselves with that victory, we're essentially tapping into a power that helps us overcome those inner
You've
struggles.
got it. And that leads us to the question of how this power translates into everyday life.
Right.
How can we actually live with the power of the cross?
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
From a symbol of suffering to a source of power. The cross is clearly a lot more than meets the eye. But I think the biggest question for me, and probably for a lot of you listening, is
Yeah.
how do we actually like tap into that power? How does it become like real in our
Yeah.
daily lives?
That's a great question, and it's where things get really interesting because living with the power of the cross isn't about mastering a set of rules or rituals. It's about an internal shift, a change in perspective.
So it's less about like outward actions and more about how we view the world, how we approach like our challenges.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful concepts I think associated with the cross is the idea of surrender.
Okay.
It's about letting go of our need to control everything, trusting that there's a bigger plan at work. You might have heard the verse from Matthew 16.24, take up your cross and follow me.
I have. But I'll be honest, that phrase always kind of intimidated me.
Yeah.
It sounded like a call to endure constant hardship, like I had to go out and seek out suffering.
I can see how it could be interpreted that way, but when you look at it through the lens of surrender,
Right.
it takes on a whole new meaning. The cross, in this context, isn't about seeking out pain. It's about surrendering our ego, our limited perspective,
Right.
and trusting in something greater.
So it's more about releasing the need to control every outcome,
Yeah.
to have all the answers, and instead allowing ourselves to be guided by like something bigger than ourselves.
That's it. And that surrender, as paradoxical as it may sound, is where true freedom lies.
Right.
When we let go of our own limited understanding, we open ourselves up to possibilities we couldn't have imagined on our own.
Okay. I'm starting to see how that connects to the power of the cross. You know,
Yeah.
it's about recognizing that we're not in this alone.
Hmm.
There's a source of strength and guidance that we can tap into.
Hmm.
But how do we actually do that? What does surrender look like in practice?
It starts with a willingness to step outside of our comfort zones, to trust that even when things are difficult, even when we don't understand, there's a purpose to it all. It's about choosing faith over fear, love over judgment.
And that probably requires a lot of humility, right?
Absolutely.
Admitting that we don't always have it all figured out.
Humility is key. It's about recognizing that we are not the center of the universe,
Yeah.
that there's a bigger picture at play, and that can be incredibly liberating.
It sounds like surrender is an ongoing process.
Right.
A daily choice to align ourselves with that bigger picture, with a power that's beyond our own understanding.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not a one-time event, but a way of life. And as we practice surrender, we become more open to the transformative power of the cross.
So surrender is one key to unlocking that power. What else is there?
Another crucial element, I think, is forgiveness.
Okay.
Think about it. Jesus, even while suffering on the cross, forgave those who were crucifying him.
Right.
And in doing so, he set an example for us to follow.
That's a powerful image. But honestly, forgiveness?
Yeah.
Especially when we've been deeply hurt, can feel almost impossible.
Yeah.
It's like we're betraying ourselves somehow.
I understand that holding on to anger and resentment can feel justified, even empowering. But the truth is, it only poisons us in the end. It keeps us trapped in that cycle of pain.
So forgiveness isn't about condoning what happened or letting the other person off the hook. It's about freeing ourselves from that bitterness that's holding us captive.
Exactly. Forgiveness is an act of self-love,
Right.
a way of reclaiming our own peace and well-being. And it's directly connected to the power of the cross because it reflects the same kind of unconditional love that Jesus demonstrated.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But how do we actually forgive when the wounds are so deep?
Right.
It feels like such a monumental task.
It's definitely a process, and it takes time, but it starts with a decision.
Okay.
A willingness to let go of the need to be right, to punish, to hold on to the pain.
Yeah.
You might need to seek guidance from a therapist or a spiritual advisor or a trusted friend. So forgiveness is about acknowledging the hurt, but then choosing to release the negative emotions that are attached to it.
Yes. And sometimes that means setting boundaries,
Right.
stepping away from toxic relationships,
Right.
or even just giving ourselves permission to grieve.
It sounds like forgiveness isn't about forgetting or minimizing what happened,
Right.
but about finding a way to move forward without being defined by the pain.
You've got it. And when we embrace forgiveness, we experience a profound sense of freedom and healing.
Right.
We tap into a power that allows us to break free from the cycle of resentment and create space for compassion and empathy.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway here for you listening? What does it mean to embrace the power of the cross in your own life?
The power of the cross is available to everyone regardless of their background or beliefs. It's about tapping into a source of strength and love that transcends our limited understanding. It's about choosing surrender, embracing forgiveness,
Right.
and living with a heart open to transformation.
It's about recognizing that the cross isn't just a symbol of the past, but a living force that can shape our present and our future. It's a reminder that even in the midst of darkness, there's always hope, always the possibility for healing and renewal.